The child who returned the martyrs and the Galactic Empire did not believe in mercy. When the rebellion broke out, they sought to break humanity's will in the most brutal way possible. They took the youngest, the weakest, and made them examples. Elias was only 10 years old when the Imperials dragged him from the refugee camps at Epsilon 3. It was just another nameless child to them, one among thousands. But to the resistance, to his family, he was everything. For 3 days, the Imperials tortured him, recording every scream, broadcasting it across occupied worlds as a warning. When his body finally gave out, his heart ceasing its rhythm, the executioners laughed. One of them, a reptilian officer named Varzith, kicked the corpse aside. "Let this be a lesson," Varzith sneered, turning to the cameras. "The Empire does not fear your weak species. Defy us, and this is what happens to your children." They left Elias's body in the cold cell, alone. His pain was over. His suffering had ended. Or so they thought. 30 minutes later the body on the floor was still. But something stirred in the air, an unseen force crackling like static electricity. The temperature dropped. The lights flickered, then, Elias took a breath, his eyes snapped open. The deep gashes and bruises across his skin faded, the broken bones mended in seconds. He sat up slowly, confused at first, then aware. Something inside him had changed, memories flooded his mind, not just his own, but of something vast, something ancient. He had died, he was sure of it. He had felt the cold grip of death. But something had pulled him back, something beyond understanding. He stood, the steel cuffs around his wrists snapping open on their own. The cameras in the cell short-circuited. The metal walls hummed as if whispering his name. Elias was no longer just a boy. He had become something else. The child walks again. The guards outside his cell were playing a hologame, oblivious to what had just happened. When the door creaked open on its own, they turned in confusion. Elias stepped out, his eyes glowing with an eerie blue light. "Impossible," one guard muttered, raising his weapon. Elias raised a hand. The guard froze, body trembling as if an invisible force had taken hold. His bones shattered with a sickening crunch, his body collapsing into dust. The second guard ran. He didn't make it 5 steps before the corridor around him twisted, warping like liquid metal. He screamed, then vanished, gone, as if erased from existence. Elias walked forward, his bare feet leaving burning imprints on the steel floor. He wasn't thinking. He wasn't planning. He was simply acting. The Empire's reckoning. By the time alarms blared across the station, it was too late. The child they had tortured, the one they had killed, had returned as something beyond human. Elias reached the command deck, the massive viewport revealing the Impetus fleet in orbit. 100 warships, gleaming behemoths of destruction, capable of reducing planets to ash. With a thought, he reached the flagship of the fleet, Barsult's personal warship, shattered violently. Bulkheads groaned, hull plating warped. The bridge crew screamed as the ship folded inward, collapsing into itself as if crushed by an unseen hand. Varzith tried to flee. His escape pod ejected, hurtling toward the planet below. Elias watched him go. He raised a finger, the escape pod disintegrated midair. The legend of the return. The Empire never fully understood what happened that day. The station was found empty, its crew gone. The warships, once symbols of Imperial might, were left drifting, powerless, and the child, some say Elias, became a myth, a ghost whispered in the darkest corridors of the Empire. Some say he still walks among the stars, an avenger of the dead, a force of nature that cannot be stopped. But one thing was certain, the Empire had thought death was the ultimate end. The boy who returned the last experiment. The chamber was silent, save for the ragged breathing of the boy strapped to the table. Electrodes clung to his skin, wires coiled around his limbs like mechanical serpents, and the scent of burnt flesh tainted the recycled air. The Imperial scientists observed from behind a reinforced viewport, their faces emotionless. "Increase the voltage," one of them ordered. The technician obeyed. The boy's body convulsed. He had long stopped screaming. His throat was raw, his voice stolen hours ago. His name was Elias Cade. It was 12 years old. And he was dying. General Varick, overseeing the experiment, leaned forward. "He's lasting longer than expected." Dr. Alsen, the lead scientist, adjusted his datapad. "Human resilience is remarkable. But it won't matter. The procedure is almost complete." Varick's eyes flickered with something resembling amusement. "Then finish it." The final surge of energy coursed through Elias' small frame. His heartbeat faltered. His chest heaved once, twice, then stopped. Alone, Shrill beep confirmed what they already knew, the boy was dead. Pack the body for disposal, Olsen muttered, shutting off the monitors. Another failure. The Imperials left the chamber. The lights dimmed. The steel door locked with a hiss, and then, 30 minutes later, Elias opened his eyes. The return his first breath came like a gasp from deep underwater. His lungs burned. His limbs ached. But he was whole. Alive, he sat up. The restraints had melted away. His skin, once charred and broken, was now smooth. The pain was gone. He looked at his hands, shaking, but unharmed. He remembered dying, yet here he was. The door remained sealed, the observation room empty. He stepped down from the metal slab, bare feet touching the cold floor. Something was different. He felt more stronger. A warmth pulsed beneath his ribs, a silent, steady rhythm that did not belong to his old body. Elias clenched his fists. Sparks of violet energy flickered along his fingertips. A voice whispered in his mind, "Move." He obeyed. With a mere thought, the chamber's reinforced door exploded outward. The alarm klaxons blared. Imperial officers stormed into the corridors, weapons drawn. Impossible! Alcén shrieked as he saw the boy standing among the wreckage. He was dead. Elias turned to the scientist who had condemned him. The moment their eyes met, something inside Elias unfolded. Alcén's scream barely left his throat before his body collapsed, skin turning ashen, veins blackening, his flesh disintegrating into dust. The soldiers hesitated. A mistake. Elias raised his hand. A pulse of unseen force slammed them into the walls. Bones chatter. They are filled with the stench of death. More would come. He knew that now. The Empire would not let him walk away. But he was no longer a helpless child. He had returned, and he would not be stopped. This but immense truth deep within the Imperial databases. Elias found the truth of his suffering, Project Revenant. The Empire had sought to create soldiers who could not die, warriors reborn through dark science and forbidden energy. They had experimented on hundreds of children. None had survived. Until him. He was their success, their greatest mistake. The uprising. The prison cells of the facility held more than just test subjects. Rebels. Dissidents. Survivors. Elias freed them all. Word of the undying boy spread like wildfire. The Empire had created something they could not control, and now their enemies had a new weapon. A living weapon. The rebellion ignited across the stars. Elias stood at the center of it all, a boy who had been killed but refused to stay dead. Epilogue. The fall of the Empire. The Emperor himself trembled when he heard the whispers. A child had returned from death, and he was coming for them all. The boy who returned. The Galactic Empire ruled with an iron fist, subjugating worlds without mercy. Humanity, a relatively new species on the galactic stage, had resisted. Their defiance enraged the Empire, leading to purges, massacres, and brutal crackdowns. On the prison world of Arcot 9, deep within the Imperial's dominion, the screams of tortured captives echoed through the cold metal corridors. Among them was a boy, Daniel Carter, barely 10 years old. The Imperial interrogators had extracted everything they wanted from him, the names of resistance leaders, hidden supply routes, and human strongholds, and when he had nothing left to give, they killed him. He should have stayed dead. Commander Varkos, the Imperial officer overseeing the interrogations, watched as the chief's lifeless body was dragged away. He turned to his lead scientist, Dr. Carlos Villar, who observed the scene with cold, detached curiosity. He lasted longer than expected, Varkos grunted. Dispose of the body. The guards nodded, moving toward the incinerator. Back before they could lift the corpse, the impossible happened. Daniel gasped, his fingers twitched. His chest rose as if he were taking his first breath. The wounds across his broken body sealed shut. His eyes snapped open, glowing with an unnatural light. The guards stumbled backward in horror. Dr. Veyer stepped forward, eyes wide in fascination. This is impossible, he whispered. Barcos drew his blaster, aiming it at the boy's head. It's a trick. Soma resistance technology. Daniel moved, not like a child. Not like a human. One moment, he was on the ground. The next, he was standing, staring at Varkos with something ancient behind his eyes. You should not have done that, Daniel said. The room trembled. Varkos fired. The blaster bolt hit Daniel square in the chest. He staggered, then straightened, the wound sealing instantly, and then, the screaming started. The returner. The guards collapsed, clutching their heads as their own bodies twisted and broke in unnatural ways. Blood leaked from their eyes as unseen forces ripped them apart. Dr. Villar fell.